Hello. Today we're having our first session actually on the course of global negotiation. You've already listened to an introduction where we talked a little bit about what's going to be presented in this course. Well, this first class, this first little session is called The Art of Mutual Agreement. And we'll be talking a little bit about negotiation as an art. Is negotiation an art, or is negotiation a science? Well, it's a little bit of each. There is science or theory to negotiating, as you'll see in the book that you're reading, Essentials of Negotiation, a very fine book, and it goes a lot into concepts and theories of negotiation. And then there's also the art of negotiation, which I believe is more related to the skills involved. So there's a skill set, there are skills. The theory of negotiation, of course, you can read about and you can understand. The art of negotiation is something you have to practice and you have to experiment with, role play with, and do in real life in order to be able to become successful and good at negotiating. So there's one part which is cerebral and there's the other part which is skill-based. So we're going to be looking at both of those in this art of negotiation. Negotiation, by definition, is two or more parties making decisions about their independent goals. So in a negotiation, there are different goals by both of the parties, or in some cases, multiple parties. But each party has its own goals. Sometimes members of the party have different goals, but at least for now, we'll be looking at goals of the parties. We're committed to a non-violent means for dispute resolution. We have to remember that. It has to be a non-violent means. We don't want violence. It's not going back to the days of the mafia or something like that, where the negotiation can have violent ends. And then, as I said, successful negotiation is very much part science, but it's also very much part art. So what are the benefits of negotiation, of mastering this art of negotiation? Well, certainly you're here because the benefits are going to be business benefits, and business benefits are very, very important. We're going to be negotiating in all kinds of situations out there. You could be negotiating in sales, you could be negotiating in purchasing, you could be negotiating in setting up strategic alliances. It could have negotiations dealing with setting up a distributor, or being a distributor, or entering into a joint venture, or being a joint venture partner. Many different sides and aspects of negotiation. Of course, in these times, especially in these difficult economic times that we're experiencing, increasing revenues is very important. And very often, if you're good at negotiating, you can be good at increasing the revenues for your company. You also can be good at increasing the margins for your company if you're good at negotiating. So it could be revenue-based, it could be margin-based, or it could be decreasing costs. So many of these applications of negotiation will be immediately useful in those three areas in your business: increasing revenues, increasing margins and decreasing costs. But there's also personal aspects in this besides the business aspects. We'll be concentrating, of course, on the business aspects, as we all are in an MBA program, and a global MBA program at that, so we'll be looking at the global aspects. But there's also personal negotiation that this course will hopefully assist you at. And that's perhaps getting a job, or negotiating for that next job. Being able to work better to get increased salary or increased benefits on the job that you're in, or that you may be going into in the future. It could be on the job used for influencing outcomes, different types of outcomes that you can influence through negotiating. It could be in the work, of course. There's a lot of internal negotiation that goes on, and through good negotiating skills, you can very often modify outcomes or influence outcomes from different types of negotiation, be it personal or business. And of course, for your own self, when you're out buying a house or buying a car, you can use these negotiating strategies and techniques in order to be able to get some better prices or some better terms. So there are some personal advantages to being good at negotiating and understanding the elements of negotiation. And of course, there are other benefits. I don't know what they might be for you. For each person out there, you can probably imagine other benefits of being a good negotiator. So I'll leave those up to you to discern. So what is the art of mutual agreement? Well, there are certain elements to it that I think are important. One is knowing your objective. What is your objective? The second one that we'll be discussing heavily in the second part of this class, of this course, is going to be having a strategy. How to develop a strategy in negotiation. Very critical, very crucial, and that'll actually come later on in the second half of this. Then we have utilizing tactics. Tactics are very important, and tactics are primarily those, although some of them are cerebral, some of them are skill-based. Most of them require certain levels of skill to be able to effectively utilize these tactics. And we'll be looking over the next couple of months, we'll be looking at quite a few different tactics, not all encompassing, and I'm sure you've run into tactics that I will not cover, but I'll try to cover some of the more common tactics used in negotiation, and we'll talk a lot about tactics and how to include these, incorporate these into your negotiations, and also to recognize tactics being used by others in the negotiation. And then aiming for a win-win. Now, we're in business, so most of the time we're looking for an outcome which is beneficial to all parties concerned, a win-win. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but you want to win a little bit more. Now, in the book we talk about integrative and distributive negotiation, which are somewhat akin to win-win, and I guess you'd say win-lose or hard negotiations. And you can read that in the book, and there's a lot of good information about that. Of course, in a negotiation, you have to keep moving ahead. That's the key. You don't stall a negotiation. You have to keep moving ahead. And in this course, we'll take a look at methods for that. And of course, any negotiation that you have, especially with another entity that's going to be in touch with you, that you're going to be doing business with in the future, any negotiation you're in is going to set the tone for future ones. So what you do in this negotiation, this particular negotiation, whatever it may be, is going to set a tone for future negotiations. You're going to be setting up the future negotiations. Now we have here a little chart which I use in my classes when I'm doing negotiation teaching for companies, training for companies, and I have them do this simple little negotiation in the beginning. It's just over one element, price, and it has to do with buying a television. But I'm not going to go through that entire exercise with you, but you can see the results. They're broken into, there's 3 teams. The first team have a point of buying this television at $1,800. That's the lowest price that the seller can sell for, and that's the highest price that I permit the buyer to buy at. After 5 minutes of negotiation, typically they come up with this point. This is a win-win point, $1,800. They both are satisfied because it's within their win-win zones. Now in the second one, you can see that they can't come together to complete the negotiation because the seller can only sell it for $1,900 and the buyer can only buy it for $1,800. So therefore there's a gap. This means, in this particular case, and this will happen to you in negotiation, it means that you cannot complete the negotiation. There is not an ability. If there's no budging, if there's no movement, then there is no ability to be able to finalize the negotiation. And that's okay. Not all negotiations are going to be finalized. You have to realize that there are times when you just are not going to be able to come together in a negotiation. There's going to be a gap. It could be on price. It could be on any of myriad factors, but there's that type of a negotiation that will not happen. And then there's the next one, and this is most common. And once again, we're only looking at one element, price, but consider this to be a negotiation, many different elements. And here you have a range between $1,600 and $1,800. And this is what win-win is all about. This little range here is why you're taking this class, or what you're going to learn in this class. Because the objective is to land within that win-win zone that we're seeing on the screen, but to land in that win-win zone a little bit closer to your win than to the opponent's win. Okay, it's to be able to move within the win-win zone just a little bit, one way or the other, to become better at negotiating and to get better results, better outcomes from that negotiation. Now, there are some types of negotiation that we will be looking at in the book and we'll be talking about. One would be called, I guess, soft negotiation. This is that you're giving in because you don't want to have conflict. I know people like that who will just, they hate conflict and they'll give in on anything in order to avoid the conflict. Then you have a win-win, which we have talked about, where all parties are comfortable with the outcome. We have a win-lose. Now, is there really a win-lose? I don't know. In the classic sense, that one party wins and the other party loses. In business, I don't see this happening very much. If a party agrees to something, you could say they're losing if they're on the short end of the agreement, but still they're agreeing to it, so they're getting something out of it. So there is some benefit. It may be on the very end of the win-win zone for that particular item, but they're still getting something out of it. So this would be win-lose. I like to speak of win-lose in a different sense. A win-lose negotiation is more of the sense of, I don't care whether I win or I lose. So, as an example on that television set that we were talking about before, if I walk into the first store and I say, I'm going to give you $1,500 for that television set, and I don't really care whether I win or lose, it's not that important to me, maybe the first time they say, no, we can't do that. You go to the next store and you try it again. And you go to the next store, and finally, one down the line is very hungry and will say, yes, we'll give it to you. So the win-lose that I'm looking at here is you're not concerned whether you win or lose the negotiation because you can go on and do it some more. So that's another way of looking at the win-lose concept. Now we have win-lose-lose. I don't think this happens very often, but either death or dishonor I have up there. And if you've ever watched, if you're a fan of old silent movies, black and white silent movies, The Perils of Pauline, when the bad guy would tie her to the railroad track and say, give me the deed to your ranch or the train will run you over. I think that Pauline was in a lose-lose situation there. But once again, very, very rare. You're not going to be in lose-lose situations like that, hopefully ever, but not very often in business. And then there's the hard negotiations, hard tactics. You're trying to get everything that you want to get. Most negotiations are somewhere between soft and hard, or some blend of differentiated versus integrative type negotiation. It's usually not one extreme or the other. There's elements, there's tactics that are used in both soft and hard negotiations. So those are the ones that we would generally classify. And what's the possible results of these things, right? So we'll leave it there today, and when we come back for the next presentation, or the second half of this presentation, we'll be talking about the possibilities of actually moving the win-win zone. Thank you, and I'll be speaking to you in a little while.